Good morning. Thank you very much. We have a question here. In the termite example, what is really the similarity with the holonic structure? Because the insects don't have any thinking, they only have intuition, and they look for survival. Thank you.
Yes. I might say a few people who've been interested in the termite example. I worked for a car company in my country in the early 1970s, and I was encouraged to think about as much as the average termite building that nest. So it's not that long ago that we required our employees to blindly follow a set of objectives. But I think the beauty of the termite example is that it is possible to create something that meets a need but only have a very simple set of guiding or overriding instructions. Many corporations are making things very complicated nowadays. And the beauty of the termite mound, probably because they're only dealing with termites, is that they only need a very small number of instructions, and yet they can build their home so purpose-built. That's perhaps the lesson.
Very good. Thank you both for your insights as we've come through Module 1. Dr. Bridges provides critical insights on how to deal with change in the workplace. This emanates not only from the changing organizational structures that Charles spoke of, but also from how technology and the transfer of information will continue to mutate at a hyper pace. Bill will also focus on how to manage the transitions you will experience as changes take place, both in the social and corporate context. You will hear that it may be necessary to let something go as you transition through changes. How do you do this? And how do you know what to let go of? Let's now begin Module 2, where Bill will discuss with us, and considering like many linkages, I want you to consider rather, if you will, the many linkages to Charles' presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. With so many miles separating us, I cannot know just what part work plays in your life, whether you have a regular job or work occasionally on a temporary basis, or are a student preparing for a professional career. It may be that you're the owner of some kind of business providing work to others, or that you teach others to prepare them for work. Whatever you do, I would probably be right if I guessed that your work life was changing, and right again if I guessed that 3 or 4 years from now it will have changed still more. These changes are occurring and will continue to occur for many reasons. Because of the globalization of industries and businesses, because of technological changes like the Internet, because more and more work is done purely with the mind instead of physically, because the values held by workers, particularly younger ones, make individual development more important to them, because of the constantly accelerating pace of change, and because power has shifted from the producers to the consumers of services and products. Because of all these things, your work future is going to be different from that of your past. How should we deal with this change? I've laid out the full program for the response we must make in a recent book called Creating You and Company, which was published in 1997, and which is available in both Spanish and Portuguese. Today, we shall be able to give only a rapid overview of the argument of that book, but here it is in brief. If we just continue to work as we always have, we will not do very well. It will not only be the disadvantage to have difficulty. It is, in fact, the very people who were the most successful under the old conditions who will have the most difficult time under the new conditions. We can already see the change in those who have become the leaders of new Internet businesses and who do the best in fast-moving international corporations, most of them are quite different from yesterday's leading executives and managers. The more ordinary individuals who know how to turn all of today's chances to their advantage will also be very different from the good employees of yesterday. If you are concerned about being ready for tomorrow, there are a number of things that you can do to help yourself. As I have studied how people deal with these changes, I've come to see that the best advice falls into four main categories. First, you need to know what you have to offer in this new workplace and how to find a customer that needs what you are offering. Second, you need to learn how to build a relationship with that customer, a relationship that benefits you both. You may be that customer's employee or you may not be, but that matters less than that you have found a way to add value to what that customer does. Third, you need to plan your future as though you were a little business, creating a business plan, rather than like a traditional employee worrying about his career. And fourth, you need to improve your ability to make transitions from one work situation to another without letting yourself become confused or unproductive. I cannot emphasize too strongly how important these four things will be to your success in the years ahead. Those who do them well will be successful. Those who do not, even if they have been very successful in the past, will run into great difficulty. This is one of those times when the rules change, and the workplace is a very unforgiving environment to those who hold on to yesterday's way of doing things. Today, security does not come from having a safe place in a big organization and the connections to protect it. Security comes from having something valuable to offer someone who needs it. The competition between organizations is too great for organizations to carry people who are holding on to their jobs. People's employment by organizations will last only as long as they provide those organizations with what they need. And that will not be as long as it was in the past. So most people will find it is necessary to move from one organization to another. The old idea that you went to work for the telephone company, for example, and stayed there for 40 years is gone forever. And this is happening everywhere. But there are ways to deal with this change. Begin by finding out exactly what it is that you have to offer this new workplace and how to find a customer that needs what you have to offer. You may first decide what is needed, or you may start by discovering what it is that you have to offer and then look around for a place to provide it. I'll start with you and then go on to where you might work, although you yourself may want to do it the other way around. In the old days, your so-called qualifications consisted of the kind of education you had had and the jobs that you had held since your education was finished. Although some traditional organizations still hire people that way, more and more organizations are realizing that the best candidate for any work situation may have studied something completely different and may never have worked in that field before. So they hire people who really want to do that kind of work, who have the basic abilities that the work requires, who are suited by temperament to that kind of work in that kind of an organization, and who happen to have particular assets that the work requires. Those assets might be a fluency in a particular language, experience in dealing with government contracts, or being comfortable in new and challenging situations. I think that within 20 years, the only people who will be hired to fill a particular job will be temporary workers. For employees who want to stay with an organization for a long time, it will be talent, motivation, congruence with the organization's values and style, and general work habits that will get them hired. The first thing that people should do, therefore, when they are planning out their futures, is to spend time, a good deal of time, answering these questions. First, what do I want, really want, at this point in my life? The answer to this question will get you in touch with the things that motivate you. Second, what am I naturally good at? I'm not necessarily referring to professional or even work-related skills, but to the everyday abilities that you have used to accomplish whatever you've done in your life. Thirdly, you should ask, what kind of a person am I? In answering this question, you will determine how you work best, what kind of situation brings out the best in you, and where a person who values whatever you value would fit in best and be most productive. Fourth and last, you should ask yourself, what incidental characteristics or experiences or kinds of knowledge do I happen to have? In this new workplace, it is critical to understand yourself well. Critical, but not in itself sufficient, because you could understand yourself perfectly, but if no one needed what you had to offer, the self-understanding wouldn't get you far. So the next thing is to find out what the world around you actually needs. You notice that I didn't say, find out what jobs are available. That is because at any given time, most of the best work needing to be done hasn't yet been packaged as a job. It is also because more and more organizations are not looking for traditional employees to solve their problems or answer their needs. They know that they can get their needs met by outsourcing the work without ever announcing a job opening or hiring someone to fill that position. That means that looking for a job may not be as good a way of making a living as simply looking for the work around you that needs doing and then finding who would pay to get it done. That way, you are looking for a person, a customer, with an unmet need or an unsolved problem, rather than looking for an organization that is hiring someone to fill a job. When you are looking for these unmet needs, don't imagine that you have to compete with all the industrial and consumer products in what people call the market. Think instead of all the little markets around you. A market, in that sense, is anywhere that people have needs that are currently not being met adequately. That might be because the need has just been created by a change, so most people aren't even aware of it yet. Or it might be because the need requires some small asset that most people in the field don't happen to have, but you do. Or it might be because people don't even acknowledge the need yet, because they are still holding on to an out-of-date way of looking at things. In fact, showing that there is an unmet need and defining exactly what it is may be more than half the task of filling it. Once that is done, everyone says, "But of course, I don't know why I didn't think of that myself." But they didn't. So they didn't discover the opportunity that you discovered by finding what was missing and needed. Just as I was writing this speech, an email arrived from someone in Colombia who had read Creating You and Company. He described his plans for leaving the big company where he worked and going out on his own as an independent worker. Then he added that his best friend had left the large retail store where he had worked for many years and had set up a little business, just as though he had read your book, he added, in which the friend took people out on trips to view the heavens through one of the telescopes that he also, it happens, sells. Because one of his assets, you see, was the hobby of astronomy. Finding such unmet needs is what entrepreneurs do. But they often think on a bigger scale than you want to. They are usually interested in starting an actual company. Some of them may be planning to make their money by selling their business after it has grown for a little while. If that is one of your desires and you have the abilities and the temperament that doing such a thing requires, that's fine. But I'm talking about something more modest and for most people more practical. I'm talking about finding work that someone needs to be done. Finding it even though they may not know it yet. When you do that, you are the answer to their problem. Though you may need to convince them that they have a problem, and you surely will have to convince them that you're what they're looking for. But you don't have to talk them into hiring you in a regular job, just paying you until you get their problem solved. You are like an entrepreneur, but the company that you start is probably just a one-person company. It is you as a company, or you as if you were a company. I call it you and company. Incidentally, you can charge quite a lot more for solving the problem than you can for simply showing up every day and doing a job, because solving problems is worth more money to people than just holding on to a job. But getting done the work that needs doing also requires something that the typical job doesn't. And that brings us to the second thing that you need to find out how to do. In the world of ordinary jobs, you get hired, and then as long as you don't mess things up or do something dishonest, you are settled for quite a while. In this new world, however, you are only hired to do a project, so you need to pay attention to doing it well. You must need to understand just what this customer of yours is looking for, so that you are sure that you are providing it. So, you have to work harder satisfying and figuring out how to satisfy your customer than people used to have to when they could just do their job and go home. You also need to learn how to build a relationship with that customer that benefits both of you. You may actually become your customer's employee, but you also may not. Whether you are or not matters less than that you add value to what that customer does. In organizations that are doing well in today's fast-changing environment, there is a lot of talk about activities that add value and those that do not. You might think that that is just one of those business terms that is popular for a while. But this one is important, because under today's circumstances, things that do not increase the value of what the organization does for its own customers are probably not worth what they cost to get done. From an employee's point of view, getting fired after working for many years is unfair. From the point of view of many employers, however, anyone who does not add value to the overall operation is an unjustifiable expense. If employers were operating in an easy environment and making lots of money, we might ask them to carry those costs. But in today's competitive world, That is a hard request to make of an employer. If that is so, then it is only common sense for the worker to find out as much about the business of the company that pays him, specifically what its needs are, as possible. Many successful companies all over the world recognize this fact and are today giving their workers far more information about the business than they used to. Obviously, the more these new kinds of workers know, the more valuable they are. They know just what the company is trying to do, what its needs are, and what would help it accomplish its goals. Such workers are more like collaborators or even partners than the old-style employees who were just supposed to do what they were told and be quiet. Now, as I say these things, you may think to yourself, yes, but the company that I work for is an old-style company, and they want me to do what I am told to be do and be quiet. That may be the case. But if that is so, your company is going to have a hard time competing against organizations here and abroad who have workers who are encouraged to think and to solve problems for themselves. Don't forget that the globalization that I mentioned earlier means that your company is now competing with organizations in other countries. Your old-fashioned company may be a good place to work, but only temporarily, while you plan out your long-range strategy for creating a successful work life. All over the world, people are working at traditional jobs while they learn how to play the roles that fit them for the new workplace. Then one day, they leave the old-style company for something more interesting that pays more money. Everyone says, "Where did Jose or Mary go?" They're kind of working on their own, someone says. Everyone shakes their head and mutters that that's a crazy idea. While those people are muttering, however, you need to go on with the third step in your plan, which is to start thinking about your future as though you were a little business, creating a business plan, rather than as though you were a traditional employee thinking about his career. Now, most ordinary business plans are drawn up as part of an effort to convince someone to lend the business money. But the kind of business plan I'm talking about is different, for it is strategic and not financial. It lays out the steps that you will take to get where you want to go. You have actually already done part of the plan, since you began by studying what you had to offer and what the markets around you needed. Those are not one-time issues, for the environment keeps changing, and so the unmet needs do too. What little you and company can provide changes too, for its one-person workforce keeps developing new desires, a new sense of its abilities, new insight into his or her temperament, and a growing list of assets. Just as an actual company needs to keep updating its plans, generating new lines of products and services, and looking for better ways to capitalize on its resources, so tomorrow's worker, and today's, if you want to get ahead of the crowd, needs to have a plan for the future. What kind of training could make you more valuable? Is there some kind of work experience that wouldn't be a promotion, but that would make you more fully qualified for a position with more responsibility? Would a visit to a place where they do things very differently than they do in your organization help you see the possibilities for both you and your organization? Could you work out some informal kind of guidance or advice by someone who knows your industry or your profession better than you do? How long is long enough to stay at a job that you don't like or one that isn't teaching you anything? In the old days, you stayed until you dropped. but people move around more today. If you had an advisor, you could talk about that. The final need that you have in a workplace full of change is skill in handling the transitions that keep occurring when organizations make the kinds of changes that seem to be happening all the time these days. The problem is not just how to keep transitions from making you confused or unproductive. It is also an issue of learning how to capitalize on the transition experience as an opportunity to do something more interesting or promising.